on our way down to Point Loma, San Diego, California. I'm going to be doing the annual Ride the Point metric century. Anyways, in this video, taking a look at the new DJI Osmo Action 5 Pro, and I'll try to answer the question of whether this is a substantial upgrade over the previous generation Action 4. So I'll tell you what has not changed is the form factor. At first glance, this almost looks exactly like the Action 4. It's got the same exact dimensions and it weighs basically the same. The sensor is also the same size. It's a 1/1.3 sensor, which makes it really good at handling low light conditions. There are a couple of different shooting modes. For instance, at 1080p, you can now go up to 240 frames per second to really slow down the action. At 4K, this camera will go up to 120 frames per second now, which honestly, I can't remember if that's the same as the Action 4. That might be a slight upgrade. The Action 4 used a traditional LiPo battery, whereas the new Action 5 uses a lithium-ion battery. And it doesn't really matter to the end user, except for the fact that we get substantially increased battery life out of the Action 5. And then another feature of the Action 5 Pro, which is actually new, I haven't seen this on any Action camera yet, is that it's got some internal storage. So you can actually run this camera without an SD card in it. I'll put up the exact amount of storage right now, but as I recall, it's definitely sufficient for like a full afternoon of shooting. Hey, it's me from the future here. I'm sure by now you noticed a little sponsored video logo up in the corner. Yes, this is a sponsored video, and I feel like it's worth bringing it up and just being transparent about it. Now, I rarely do these. The only time I ever actually do sponsored videos is typically if it's for gear not related to bikes. So action cameras, 360 cameras, these are tools that I use to create videos. The cameras themselves are not what I would consider bike gear. So agree or disagree, but when it comes to sponsor reviews, which to me means taking a financial incentive to make a video, I still maintain that I don't do that for bona fide bicycle gear. And with that, we'll get back to the video. Other noticeable upgrades over the Action 4 is that the front and back screens are now using a really bright OLED display. I've been using this camera for a few weeks now and it just feels really familiar. I was using the Action 4 for about a year before I got the Action 5, so the switch from the Action 4 to the Action 5 as far as the user interface, pretty much exactly the same. Oh wait, there's all kinds of spots here. Excuse me, dude. Now, one of the things that's really cool about this particular action camera over any other is that because DJI manufactures their own microphone system, there's basically seamless integration between the Osmo Action 5 and the DJI Mic 2. So there's a Mic 2 charging case. When you open it, you get the two transmitters and then a receiver that you can use to attach to any other camera. Now, this is actually a charging case, which is really cool. But for me, the coolest part about this is that the integration is pretty seamless. So I can just pull out one of these transmitter, and all I did was take it out of the case after an initial pairing process, and it's hooked up. So this is the transmitter number 1, and the really cool thing about this is that I've got two transmitters. So I can actually use both transmitters, and I can easily do like a two-person interview like I did the entire time that I was at the Made Bike Show up in Portland. And this is all you need. You don't need any extra dongles or wireless doodads. Right, so this is transmitter 1 right here. I'm in the car. This is transmitter number 2 way back here. I'd say that's pretty cool if you ask me. So we're about 18 miles into the ride now. Pit stop here. Been shooting pretty much all morning, and battery's still at 70%. So battery life is substantially longer, I would say, than the Action 4. To give you a sense for the dynamic range, I'm standing in a shadow, and right behind me is direct sunlight. So there's the sun right there. I'm standing in a shadow, facing away from the sun. So yeah, dynamic range is really good on the camera. I think it was also on the Action 4 as well. Can't tell if there's any noticeable difference between the 4 and the 5, but it does look pretty good. All right, another one in the bag. Metric Century, 62 miles. Heading back to my car. It's pretty windy, So I'm curious what the onboard light sounds like in, you know, some pretty substantial wind here. Wind reduction is generally pretty good, but you know, there's only so much it can do. Alright, so since I've got it, might as well just use the mic too. Cut out on some of that noise. Yeah, there you go. Super simple. You just open the mic and it just magically connects. I brought an extra battery, but I didn't even need it. The first battery is still at 54%, which is wild to me. You know, I wasn't shooting the entire day, but I had it on and off pretty frequently over the course of like 7 hours. I'll put on screen right now how much footage I actually captured in terms of gigabytes, just to give you a sense for the battery life. So as far as things that I don't really like about the camera, there aren't too many, but I do like using the quick capture feature where you just have to push the record button when the camera's off and it turns the camera on and starts recording. I really like that feature on all the cameras that I use because when you're out on a ride, you see something that you want to shoot, you just one button and you're recording. But when I use it right now, every time I use a quick capture feature, there's like an info page that comes up first that I have to click confirm. And so I think what's happening when that message comes up is that it wants you to pair to the app and update the firmware for the camera, which in theory you should only have to do once in a while, then you wouldn't see that screen pop up. But until I do update the firmware, every time I try and quick start the camera, that message comes up and I have to click confirm. So it's not really quick capture at that point, in my opinion. See, the mic makes it super easy for me to talk to you, even though I'm outside of the car and you're inside the car. So another thing that I'm not super fond of is actually the Rocksteady Plus feature. Now, as far as image stabilization, it actually does its job really well. But in my opinion, the jump from regular Rocksteady up to Rocksteady Plus is a little bit too big in terms of how far the camera crops in when you're using Rocksteady Plus. So these are some shots that I used on today's ride. I'm using regular Rocksteady, which is perfectly fine for a road ride where it's not too bumpy. And I'm just using the jaw mount here to capture some quick clips. But then when I take this same setup on a gravel trail, I have to bump up the stability to Rocksteady Plus just because it can be a little more treacherous. And when I do that, the Rocksteady Plus crops in so far that it's not as immersive anymore because you're not seeing as many of the peripheral things like plants and bushes and bits of trail kind of whizzing by, which gives you that sense of speed and immersion. Then I would say probably the last thing that I'm not a super big fan of on the Action 5 is the mounting system. Now I know that's a little bit controversial because the quick release mount for the DJI stuff is so good, and when I'm using the quick release mount, it's great. I especially like using the quick release mount if I'm wearing the chesty strap and I want to, like, you know, make a quick adjustment on the camera, just click it back into place and then I can go. But the one thing I wish that the DJI camera actually had was a 1/4-20 mount underneath. As much as I like using the quick release mounts, there are certainly instances where I'd like to use a 1/4-20 mount as well. In particular, I've started using this jaw mount a lot, which is really convenient for just getting quick on-bike shots. But the jaw mount only comes with a 1/4-20. So right now the setup is, well, you can just see it here, right? So it's jaw mount to GoPro 3-finger mount, which then goes to the DJI quick release mount and then to the camera. So, you know, the whole point of the quick release is to be quick and easy, which I appreciate. But if I'm using a mount like this, which I use pretty frequently now, I'd almost rather just have it, you know, jaw mount to 1/4-20 on the camera, which on the GoPro I can, and a lot of the other cameras like the Insta360 X4, which is probably one of my favorite cameras, I just mount that straight to the 1/4-20 and I'm good to go. So if it were possible and, you know, it wouldn't take up a ton of real estate, I would actually like to see a 1/4-20 mount on the bottom side of the Action 5 Pro. Okay, so the Action 5 Pro, it's an amazing camera, as was the Action 4. Do I legitimately think it's a worthwhile upgrade to get the Action 5 if you already have the Action 4? That's a little bit of a toss-up. I do like the fact that the Action 5 has a slightly bigger screen. I do like that it uses the OLED screens front and rear. The battery life on the Action 5 is substantially improved over the Action 4, which could be reason enough to upgrade from the Action 4 if you use, you know, the cameras a lot and you're always draining your batteries. For me, if I had the Action 4 and it was in perfect working condition and I wasn't running into the issue of like draining my batteries all the time, then I'm not sure if it's such a worthwhile upgrade, if I'm being totally honest. I do, however, like that the Action 5 incorporates some amount of internal storage. Now again, it's not a ton of storage, but I think it would definitely cover you for a day out shooting if you forgot your SD cards. It's really just that peace of mind knowing that you have that internal storage if you really need it. And then for dislikes, again, they're pretty minor. I think if they would just put that 1/4-20 mount on the bottom of the Action 5, I know it's kind of a personal thing, not everyone would use it, but I would personally benefit a lot from it. So again, if you're looking for an action camera, you like the DJI stuff, and you really want that killer battery, then this is definitely the way to go. I can't believe this battery is still going. I started running the camera at 7 a.m. this morning. It's now 3 p.m. and I've been using it on and off all day, including pairing it to the Mic 2 in some instances and shooting in 4K 30 the whole day. So the battery life is pretty incredible, and that's almost the headline feature of the Action 5. Oh, and if it weren't obvious, I shot this entire video using the Action 5 Pro, and I took it through some variety of lighting conditions. We started when it was dark. A lot of the shots were in bright daylight, which is like ideal for an action camera, but then there were also some challenging lighting conditions, like being backlit or going through, you know, patchy shadows where there's like a lot of high contrast. And overall, I think the camera does pretty good in most situations. Now, I'm not one to do a bunch of pixel peeping and do like a ton of side-by-side comparisons, just like scrutinizing every frame of a shot. But for me, overall, the quality coming out of the Action 5 Pro is just really, really good. I honestly can't imagine it getting much better than 4K or 5.3K. Really happy with the image quality coming out of this camera. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up for this one. If you have any questions about my experience with the camera so far and or the DJI Mic 2, just drop them down in the comments. I'll do my best to get back to as many as I can. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And we'll see you next time.